We get all sorts of questions here at Telling the Truth, and not least from single people, men and women. There are many questions about singleness, and I have often been asked, what does the Bible say about being single? Well, it does say things in principle, but let me tell you a rather interesting passage in the book of Corinthians. Paul was speaking about being married and being single. The background is a crisis, and he says, because of this present crisis, which most people believe was the persecution that had begun in Rome, where Christians would get thrown to the lions and all that good stuff. Okay, that was the present crisis. And it was coming towards Corinth and the tiny infant church that had been established there. And Paul writes and says, because of this present crisis, let me tell you, whether you're married or whether you're single, while this crisis situation pertains, I'd like to suggest that all of you, married and single, live single-mindedly. And then he says, secondly, I would like to suggest, or more than suggest, that you unclutter your life, those in business as if they weren't in business, those who are merchandising as though they weren't, etc., etc., and you all attain to the crisis situation in your land. I think that's pertaining right now here in America. And he says, live single-mindedly, revel in God, and unclutter your life. And he says the single person has an advantage because they're not worried about seeing their whole family thrown to the lions if they have become Christians. And they can attend upon the Lord without distraction and be a force for good and for God in crisis situations. So I'm talking about the crisis, the new normal that has reappeared. I was in the air on 9/11. I was among the 57 planes that got taken to Newfoundland as the horror began and the planes fell into those buildings. I stayed 6.5 days in Gambo, Newfoundland, with my plane load of 118 people from many different nations. When I got back, Candy Crawley was on the television, and she said, this is the new normal. I would like to suggest we're still living in the new normal. And whether we get married or whether we don't, whether we're single forever or not, I would suggest a little dose of that passage of Scripture is good for all of us. Those that are married live as those that are not. Does that mean you ignore your family? No, of course not. It just means you've got more headaches. You've got more problems. But the single woman, and he's talking about women in this particular passage, the single woman has an opportunity to revel in God, to attend upon the Lord. She is free from those responsibilities that a married person has. And I believe that Jesus is enough. I understood that I had to learn to be single and content and do it for God. And that enhanced my marriage when unexpectedly, because I honestly didn't believe I would ever get married, for many reasons. But when it happened, yes, you've got a whole lot more problems when tough times and crisis time comes. So I would just say to you singles, are you in a church? Are you serving the Lord? This is the new normal. Use your time. And you know something? In that situation, you'll meet other people of like minds, and who knows, God may bless you with a marriage and family as well.